I'm Erika Galentin with the Northwest School of Aromatic Medicine. And today we are here to talk about one of the long lost loves of herbalism, and also a very, very popular essential oil, Clary Sage. Salvia sclarea. Salvia sclarea is its Latin name. It is a sage, and as such is a part of the mint family. The essential oil itself is quite high in a couple of compounds, linalool and its ester, linalool acetate, which are known to have a very relaxing, calming, antispasmodic effect on the body. Or maybe we could say even a soothing or balancing action on the nervous system, right? So in some cases, this plant is even considered, or the essential oil is even considered hypnotic. Not in an unsafe way or a losing control of oneself sort of way, but more in a lunar moon, quieting the emotional mind sort of way. Another compound that is found in the essential oil is a diterpene called sclareol. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there seems to be a lot of talk out there about this essential oil being estrogenic. Now, I did mention that the sclareol, this compound, can actually insert itself into estrogen receptors. Right? That has been shown in petri dishes to be true. Whether or not that happens in a living human body is not been researched, so we don't really know. And just because something's happening in a petri dish doesn't mean it's happening in the body. You can't make that leap. But I think it's interesting when we look back at that historical account of, stirring up bodily lust and stirring up the venery and being used to promote fertility, that there may be something in, especially the whole plant medicine, that is supportive in some capacity of hormone balance and ecology, right? And so it's interesting because people can take its estrogen-like effects and get really freaked out about that and say, oh, you can't use it in children, or men shouldn't, biologically male or men shouldn't use it because it's bad for them, or they get really weird about these kinds of, what does estrogenic mean? And what does that mean that you shouldn't use it for? And that's just a very wrong way of looking about things. Clary Sage is very safe. It's not a problematic oil in any kind of capacity. For those of you who are interested in the safety profile of Clary Sage essential oil, I highly recommend you go to Robert Tisserand's book, Essential Oil Safety Handbook, and you go ahead and you look at what he has to say about Clary Sage. We have to dive back into history to find information about the medicinal kind of virtues of the plant that are outside of this essential oil form. Looking at specifically the work of John Gerard in his History of Plants, which was written, he was an English herbalist and doctor who wrote the History of Plants, I think it was 1636, around that time, so quite a long time ago. So he was writing about clary, and he spelled it both ways, with the Y or with the IE. But his focus in particular was on the seed. He says here, I'll just quote him, "The seed, mixed with honey, take away the dimness of the eyes and clears the sight." And so this is where we get clear eye from in the English tradition of the name of this plant. He goes on to talk about with the clary sage that there's a mucilage or a slime sort of substance that is produced from the seed when it's soaked in water. And it's interesting because we see this in other sage species like chia, for example. He says here that applied as a plaster draws out splinters of wood, thorns, and any other fixed thing in the body. It also scatters and diffuses all kinds of swellings, especially in the joints. So John Gerard also brings in a tradition of use about the leaves of Clary Sage, right? So one of the things that he says here, I'll just read this out to you. Leaves put into pottage or broths, right? Among other pot herbs, for they scatter congealed blood, warm the stomach, and help the dimness of the eyes. Now, the idea of scattering congealed blood, congealed blood, is a little bit different back in the 1600s than it is now. So really, this is about opening up obstructions in the body where they thought there was obstructions, or places where there was kind of stuckness or stagnation, and also to kind of thin the blood so it could move more freely. So in the absence of proper circulation and things like this. The warming of the stomach makes a lot of sense to me. This is how an aromatic plant often works inside the digestive system, where it helps to kind of stimulate digestive juices and digestive enzymes, and even digestive movements. So we end up having kind of an increased digestive fire. So the Clary Sage is said to do that. Helping the dimness of the eyes is really kind of interesting because, in herbalism, and even in my clinical experience, as well as in my personal experience, there is oftentimes a very much a deep connection between the state of digestive health and wellness and clarity of the mind. And so we can often find where there's, digestive stagnation, there's also sort of cognitive stagnation as well. People can feel dull-headed and fuzzy-headed and foggy-headed, etc. And that when you stimulate digestion and really get those fires going, that it clears the mind. So moving on from John Gerard, we get to Nicholas Culpeper. He actually puts Clary Sage under the rulership of the moon. The moon was sort of considered to be the sensory side of the brain, or the part of the brain that dealt with the senses. And so it also was thought to control, functions of growth and balance, and all of these pieces that kind of operate in us unconsciously. So there's this mind and nervous system sort of inclination starting to come in. Moving on from Nicholas Culpeper, we have William Salmon around 1710 in Botanologia, the English Herbal. He lists a whole bunch of actions for this plant, including things like aperitif, so again, helping to kind of spark the digestive fire. He talks about it as a vulnerary, so supportive of healing wounds. He calls it a pectoral also, which means that, it's kind of opening and supportive to respiration in the chest, which is interesting. That's kind of the first time that comes out in the herbal history. He talks about it as a hysteric. And this is an action that refers to, both sort of nervous system as well as kind of physical pain that can be associated with the menstrual cycle. Hysteric or hysteros is Latin for womb. He also talks about it as a spermatogenic. And so this is where we start to think about the idea of the seed, and John Gerard is saying the seed stirs up bodily lust. We're now moving into this kind of idea that it's actually the plant that is helping to produce, the gametophytes or the sperm, and we even see kind of this increase in fertility. So we go from this idea of being an aphrodisiac or stirring up lust, or what they call the venery. It's a quite interesting word. And it kind of goes more into this idea of promoting fertility. Fertility for both biological sexes. And so that's really quite interesting, because when we start to jump over into our modern understanding of the pharmacology of some of the compounds in the whole plant medicine, there are compounds in there that are very, very similar. Well, let's just say this. They fit in well to estrogen receptors, which are found in both biologically male and female bodies. And so the estrogen receptors are about building tissue and creating implantation, and all kinds of fertility things are surrounding estrogen receptors and whatnot. Now, the extent to which Clary Sage actually does this when internalized is unknown. We don't know how many estrogen receptor cells it targets and how powerful it is as an agonist for those receptor cells. But there does appear to be, especially when we look at the tradition of use, there's something going on hormonally with this plant. It does something to support hormone ecology, I think, surrounding this idea of fertility. Having gone back through the history of this plant and having such a love for it in my gardens, I have started bringing the whole plant medicine into my clinical practice. And so, what we have right here in this jar is actually a tincture of the flowering parts of Clary Sage. And this is something that I will use, not all the time, it's dependent on the person, but I will use in blends for supporting fertility. And it's I think, a really profound, powerful, supportive, gentle, very safe type of tonic for the reproductive system in both biologically male and female bodies. The hydrosol and the essential oil are best produced from fresh, right? But you can dry Clary Sage, aerial parts, the leaf and flowering parts. You can dry it and make it, blend it into teas, doing tea blends. So, whether or not that's, supporting your actual fertility, or maybe it's in support of, creating fertile ideas or just creativity. I really feel like Clary Sage, you can bring Clary Sage into any work that you're trying to do in manifesting yourself. So creative work, it has this wonderful impact on the mind. It's very lunar. It can really kind of tap into those unconscious places and bring things forward. And so it's really lovely as a tea. But what I'll say is that, it's got quite a profound aromatic and also flavor profile. And I have found that it's best blended with other herbs. It also makes a really lovely infused oil. Oh my gosh. It's very subtle. It's not like Clary Sage, the way that it usually is coming out of the bottle or out of the teacup. It's a little bit more subtle than that, but it makes a really beautiful infused oil. So, and thinking about bringing that into your life in all kinds of interesting and intimate ways, the infused oil is a really, really nice thing to do. I would say that you'd want to focus on making an infused oil from the dried Clary Sage, freshly dried. So it's crispy, it's crunchy, but maybe you grew it that season. Take good care, enjoy that Clary Sage, and I'll see you next time.